This is
the Bottom Bins Podcast.
Oh, yes! Hello and welcome back to the Bottom Bins Podcast. Taking a wee bit of a break from perfect pre-season and heading back to the summer transfers this week. It's been 2 weeks of summer transfers that we have to cover, and there is plenty to cover, plenty going on in the market. Just want to get a quick one off his first, lads. I actually think this market's been quite interesting. What's your guys' take on the early weeks of the summer market so far?
It's definitely been different. Definitely been different. We're seeing a lot of transfers to Saudi, obviously, and like we're even seeing some ridiculous fees going, like ridiculous transfer fees going to Saudi. But then we're seeing players like Marcelo Brozovic going for 14 million, which I think if any other club in Europe offered 14 million to Inter Milan, they would tell you where to go. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's difficult. It's weird. It's interesting, especially when you see like Chelsea's business and obviously whether all that's going through the books properly and stuff, and Newcastle as well. And I don't know. It's strange, but definitely fascinating, and it definitely makes a change from the same old boring stuff that we're used to in most transfer windows. So it's good to see some players making the move to wherever they go. Do you know what I mean? That we wouldn't usually see linked with even a move away.
Yeah, I agree.
It's weird. Like,
Sorry, Connor, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I just found it weird as well with the Saudi stuff and all. And it'd be fascinating to see how that works out because it feels like a lot of. I know you're saying that one was cheap, but they will probably push up prices as well. A lot of teams are trying to get their business done early as well. But it'll just be fascinating to see how that works out because if these Saudi clubs are offering this much money, obviously, I don't think Premier League clubs can offer them kind of wages to compete.
No, it's definitely an interesting one. I mean, yeah, the Saudi League have definitely sort of thrown a spanner in the works this summer, and it is going to be interesting to see how many more players maybe end up over in Saudi Arabia. I mean, the money is just when you see some of the contract proposals, you're like, holy shit, that's absolutely mental. But anyway, getting straight into it, lads. The first transfer we're going to open up with today is actually a transfer that sort of come out of absolutely nowhere. 70 million euros. Sandro Tonali, the talented Italian midfielder, is completing his move to Newcastle. Medical was done today. They're just waiting for the official announcement, but I never thought I would be saying that Sandro Tonali was going to be playing at Newcastle. It's a really, really strange one.
Do you know what? I think it has the potential to be the sign of the summer. I rate Tonali so highly. Not that I've watched him a whole pile. I've seen a few of his appearances, but I remember whenever he was moving to Milan from Brescia, and he was linked with Manchester United then, and I decided to look him up then. He was being quoted for a fee of like 40 million, but Milan ended up getting that bit of business done for 15 million, but they took him. They bought him for 15 million, loaned him back for a year. So that's how they worked it with Brescia, and he developed for another year in Serie A before moving on to Milan. And I just think he's been absolutely phenomenal for them ever since. Like, he's 23 and he's such a leader. Like, he's the captain of the Italian under 21s at the Euros there as well. He's just a fantastic player. He's so good defensively, but he's also very good progressively, and we've seen that in the Champions League this year and all as well with AC Milan, who got knocked out in the semi-final. I think he's going to be absolutely phenomenal for Newcastle. Like, looking at their midfield, we've talked about their midfield all year. Bruno Fernandes and Joe Linton, I think they're the stalwarts in that midfield. And look, Joe Willock's done his bit, but we've said all year the likes of Matty Longstaff and Joe Willock can't be looked at as starting every single game, especially when playing Champions League football as well this year. So in terms of rotation and all, it's an absolutely phenomenal signing with heaps of ability and heaps of potential. People are going to look at the price tag, but Eddie Howe knows what he's doing. He spent the exact same transfer fee on Alexander Isak, and everybody was saying, he's not going to be able to cut it. And we've seen in the last few weeks of the Premier League season, especially, that he is a phenomenal striker. So I would say keep an eye on Sandro Tonali, because he's definitely going to be one to watch this season.
Yeah, definitely makes Newcastle's midfield a lot more interesting. Even, when you think of like a lot of Newcastle fans would think of Bruno as their destroyer in midfield, but I actually think Tonali is like they're almost the perfect complement to one another. What Bruno does well defensively is where Tonali is maybe a bit weak, but then where Tonali excels in terms of that ball recovery and recovery pace is maybe where he beats Bruno out, and that's where they do complement one another very, very well. And like you said, Oren, I totally agree. Excellent progressor of the ball, but look, I mean, he is Italian. There has to be some sort of natural footballing ability in there as well. It is just one of those deals really that has struck me because it did just come out of nowhere. There was no talk about it. There was no like sort of build up to it. There was no like Fabrizio, Newcastle have contacted Sandro Tonali's agent. There was none of that. It was just, Newcastle have launched a bid for Sandro Tonali, by the way, so just keep your eye out on that one. But I think the interesting thing with this is the player cried on his last day at Milan and was really, really adamant that he didn't want to actually leave Milan. It's just the financial state that they're in that they had to sell such an integral part of their squad. So I think that's going to be interesting to watch out for as well. How does he adapt? How does he develop in the Premier League? Definitely interesting to watch.
Yeah, definitely. I was surprised at this signing too, just because of how quick it happened. I think it's a steal. As you were saying, he's like 14 caps for Italy. He's a top player. He also will give Bruno more freedom to get forward because he'll play more as a six. And as you said as well, he can progress with the ball. He just has it all. I seen Rafael Leao was raging that he's leaving. He said he's an important player for us. He's our best midfielder. He's made a difference. He was a key reason why they won the Serie A and then they got the Champions League semi-final last season. He's kind of like, there was talk that he was going to be Gattuso's heir to the throne, but a player that probably wanted to stay, wanted to be a legend at Milan, but as you said, financially, that probably had to get rid of him. And Newcastle gave them an offer, that they just couldn't refuse. And he can score goals. He can cover so much ground. A real player for the future, like 23, a player that feels like has been about for a while. Again, like Newcastle will have a very, very strong midfield next year. And again, Newcastle just like, I know Declan Rice going to Arsenal, we're going to talk about him, but Tonali is a top player too, and they got him cheaper. And I think he will be one of the best defensive mids in the league next year.
Well, look, just talking about Declan Rice, we always have to consider the English tax when it comes to players, and especially when you're selling to players in the Premier, or when you're selling players from one club in the Premier League to another club in the Premier League. So perfect transition. Moving on to Declan Rice, then, lads. Looks like the deal with Arsenal is wrapped up. They're sort of just waiting again for that final announcement to get that deal over the line. But all in all, when you look at the intent that Arsenal have shown already in the market, Havertz, Rice, possibly Caicedo, and they're still in the market as well for Timber. I think it's a real statement of intent from Arsenal this summer.
Yeah, we talked about it all season. My main reason all season for not saying that they were going to win the league was their squad depth, and we've seen that with one real injury to Saliba that obviously they fell apart last season. But we talked a lot saying that was that Arsenal's chance, but with this statement of intent, as you're saying, Connor, like there's a real opportunity for Arsenal to be fighting for the title once again next season. And look, they needed to improve in their squad, not just for the league, but they're playing Champions League football once again next season, and they'll be looking to go as far as possible in that. And they needed to improve their squad, and like Manchester City, they needed at least 2 first-team quality players for each position, and that seems to be what they're doing. And obviously, they're spending big money. Look, 105 million for Declan Rice. It's a lot of money. Obviously, a lot of money. I will say personally that a lot of people are saying, oh, if he was still Irish, he would be going for 60 million or whatever. I do agree with that to an extent. However, in terms of improving Arsenal, he would be worth 105 million to them. It's the same way whenever we originally signed Harry Maguire, even though it was 80 million, he was an improvement on our defence. So I was like, makes sense. In the long run, look, it hasn't worked out yet, but it made sense at the time because for the first 2 years that he was there, he probably was our best defender. And I'm not just a fan by any means, his £80 million price tag, but to Manchester United, he was worth his value, if you know what I mean. I've seen Declan Rice first hand playing live. I've seen him play against Manchester United, and we only ended up winning that game in the 93rd minute. And Declan Rice was by far the best player on the pitch. He was absolutely phenomenal. And it was the first time I really appreciated him as a player because beforehand I wasn't actually a big fan. I thought everybody was jumping onto a bandwagon of him, but he is a really, really good player and he would improve any team. I think he has made the wrong decision. I think he would have started at Manchester City. However, going to Arsenal with all these signings, you never know. It could be, for him, it could be a better transfer, but you never know. Arsenal could be up there once again next season.
It's an interesting one, Oren, in the sense that, Arsenal's still a fantastic project to join. They did almost win the Premier League title last season, and it is always hard to compete with the team that's just won the treble. But I mean, I think the fact that Rice has selected Arsenal over City is a big it is a big statement in itself. He's snubbing the team that just won the treble to sign for a team who, like you said, are realistically going to be in a title fight again next season. So does he possibly look at Arsenal as the avenue that's going to deliver him success rather than Man City? I think a lot of things that people forget is Guardiola is contracted at City for this season coming and the following season. Has he definitively told Manchester City, I will not be here after that second season? And what do Man City look like after Guardiola? So maybe placing his faith in Arteta and placing his faith in Arsenal is what's going to deliver him to that next level. I think he's an excellent player. I think he had a really, really poor start to last season, but he did manage to recover his form. I think West Ham have got an excellent fee for him. He's won them a European trophy, their first major trophy since the 60s. So I really, really think he's done everything he could do at West Ham. It's time for that step up now, and it's time to see if you really are one of the elite defensive midfielders in world football.
I think a lot of that does come down in terms of Manchester City as well. I don't think they were willing to match the 105 million, and we know they don't spend an awful lot of money. And I think that money that they were going to invest in Declan Rice, it looks like they're going to invest that in Jasko Vardiel, which could be an absolutely phenomenal signing for Manchester City, as we all know his talents. But look, Declan Rice to Arsenal, as you say, it's a project. It is a proper project, and Arteta seems to know what he's doing. He's got the fans finally behind him. And he has, it wasn't so long ago that he was being likened with Pep Guardiola. So it's not as if he's an awful manager just because he couldn't get the job done fully last season. He fought right until the very end. And adding Declan Rice will certainly improve your team.
No, definitely. Like, it's exciting times at Arsenal. If I was an Arsenal supporter, I'd be impressed because Arteta, he wants him in. He thinks he's going to be integral to the squad. I think it's an upgrade on Partey, to be honest. A player that, as you said, didn't start the season very well, but West Ham were a very poor side last season, and he was one of their best performers. He can tackle. He can go forward with the ball. He started scoring some goals towards the end of the season. I think he'll suit a team that's going to dictate the possession as well. West Ham didn't really do that. They kind of played that counter-attacking game. I just expect them to thrive at Arsenal. And, Arsenal, as we've said for years, like, if you're going to challenge Man City, you need to have squad depth. The end of last season, they got a few injuries, and they collapsed. And now that they have that depth, they're getting Timber, they're getting Rice, they're getting Havertz. They'll probably get they'll probably, if they get rid of Partey, they'll get another midfielder. It's just really exciting times at Arsenal. And Declan Rice, yes, could have chose City. I think, as Oren said there, I think City are more looking at a centre back. But I think Arsenal, the underdog, kind of ties to them. I think that's over now. This team has impressed last year, but this year there's going to be a lot of expectancy on them, and I expect them to challenge for the league and, at least win a trophy. And I think Rice, as you said, owes nothing to West Ham, and it's time to move on. And I've seen he wanted to stay in London, and a player, he's a leader, and Arsenal are losing a leader in Xhaka, and now they're going to gain one in Rice. And I think it's just a win-win for both sides because now West Ham get a bit of money. for a player that's out of contract, I think, is it next year or the year after, and Arsenal get a top player. I know there's going to be a bit of English tax on that money or on the price tag, but he is a player that would probably go into any side in the Premier League.
Yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree. Well, moving it on, lads, to Villa Park then. Again, kind of like Tonali, a transfer that, number one, shows the pull of the Premier League, no matter where you sit in the league, and maybe shows the pull of Unai Emery. Pau Torres looks like he's on his way to Aston Villa. The here we go was given, the green light was given by Fabrizio Romano, and Pau Torres is going to be a Villa player next season. Now, this is a player that has been linked with Man United, Bayern Munich, Chelsea over the last 3 or 4 seasons. Very talented centre back, starts for Spain. Left-footed centre back, always very desirable in the market. And I mean, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind this guy's gonna come into Aston Villa and he's gonna make them 10 times better.
100%. What a signing. What a signing. As you say, linked with all them clubs, and he had a release clause. This is the most interesting part of it to me. He had a release clause of £60 million, and Aston Villa have signed him for €35 million. What a signing this is, and it does show the pull of Unai Emery. It shows the pull of European football at a club like Aston Villa as well, a prestigious Premier League club. Shows the pull of the Premier League. I think now looking forward, and I'm hoping they both stay fit. I think we could see one of the best Premier League centre back partnerships this season with Aston Villa, like we seen with Botman and Fabian Schär last year at Newcastle. I think if they both stay fit, Diego Carlos and Pau Torres, that on paper anyway, that's one of the strongest centre back partnerships in the league. And I don't care what anybody says, that's fact. So hopefully they stay fit for Unai Emery, because they'll get far. Are they in their Europa League, aren't they? Or are they
Conference League.
Conference League? They'll get far in the Conference League. Yes, no, so that's right. They'll get far in the Conference League. I think they'll win the Conference League. If West Ham come in last year, Aston Villa have absolutely every right to win it this year. Yeah, exciting times at Villa Park.
It's massive. Like this is a player that has been scouted by, like I said, the top European clubs, and has been on a lot of radars of top European clubs for a long time. The fact that he starts for Spain, who notoriously produce fantastic centre backs, lets you know the caliber and the pedigree that this player brings to Aston Villa. And Pau Torres is immediately going to come in. He's going to change Villa's style of play, because they're going to be able to be comfortable playing out from the back with Emi Martinez in goal, Diego Carlos, who's not bad on the ball, and then Torres, who's an excellent distributor of the ball. Like, you're looking at a guy who over the last 3 seasons has 4 assists in La Liga. This is a guy who, very similar to Lisandro Martinez and Lindelof, loves to ping a ball over the top, and with the attacking talent that Villa have, they can definitely run onto those balls. So I just think he's going to add another dimension to Villa's game. And do you know what, guys? I've heard a few people, even when I was at the Armagh match on Saturday, we were having a debate to Villa finish above Newcastle. It could be an interesting season this season.
Definitely. I just even see some of the stats: the most completed passes, the most take-ons, the second most created chances for a centre back in La Liga. A really top player who's played under Emery before. Again, very progressive with the ball. The only thing is, I've read about him is people I know you were saying Bayern were in for him and other teams like that. The only thing is his physicality. His aggressiveness on the ball. He's over 6 foot, but apparently in the air maybe not as strong. But Villa don't really play that well or that way. They're going to look for a possession game. He's going to suit that. He's comfortable on the ball. Villa, as you said, they're going to be a very tough side next year. And it's really exciting, because it looks like it's going to be the most competitive Premier League ever. I feel like City could maybe, if they come off a wee bit, there's so many teams that can compete. I don't think Villa are going to compete for the title, but they're definitely going to compete again for Europe. This is a side that came 7th last year, and they started under Gerrard, and they were brutal. And Emery changed the philosophy of the side and the way they played football. And he even said, last year at stages, he was give him more time, because once he gets this preseason, I think next year they're going to be even better. And they're getting, as you said, a regular for Spain, and Spain's a top side in Europe or in world football. So I believe this is one of the most one of the best sign. This is probably even more surprising than the Tonali one for him to go to Aston Villa. This is a guy who could be playing Champions League football next year for a top club, but he chose to go to Villa. So it just shows Emery just has that pull.
Yeah, it does. And look, just on your point there, Connor, about this being the most competitive Premier League season, I know at the very end, our end of season review, we actually said with the teams that were coming up, maybe the quality level in the Premier League had dipped down a bit. But when you look at some of the signings that have been made already this season, it's going to be an incredibly strong Premier League in terms of those squads. Like Villa finished 7th last season. I've no doubt with Tielemans, Torres, and if they can maybe pull themselves, a decent winger with a decent goal output, I don't see any reason why this side can't be challenging 5th, 4th, possibly 3rd, possibly, depending on how the other teams in the league shape around them. But look, incredibly interesting signing, no doubt about it. And going to the opposite end of the Premier League table then, lads, Bournemouth got rid of Gary O'Neill. A bit of a controversial sacking amongst Cherry supporters, but they have managed to get themselves what I class as a marquee signing for Bournemouth. Justin Claver has signed on a permanent deal to Bournemouth. Look, this is a player that has been out on loans over the past few years, but about 3 years ago, was regarded as one of the best young talents in world football. And I think under the right management and in the Premier League, I think we could see this guy really, really skyrocket, and we could see his stock rise monumentally over this season. So what are we thinking then, lads? Justin Claver to Bournemouth.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think it's going to take a manager to fully take him under his wing. So I hope this new manager at Bournemouth is willing to do that. Look, £9 million, it's a no risk fee, no risk transfer for me.
Small fee, you might say.
A small fee, yeah. Yeah, so I've looked at this transfer. I done an article looking at 3 specific transfers, and it was Kerfin Thuram, 4 transfers: Kerfin Thuram, Lillian Thuram's son, and Marcus Thuram as well, Justin Kluivert, and Timothy Weah, who all look to be on the move this summer, with 3 of them already moving. And when I was looking at Justin Kluivert, well, when I was looking at all of them, they all kind of have a similar career path, and they follow quite a similar career path as their fathers did as well. And look, as you said, the potential in this player is untapped still. He's still very, very young, but this is a player, whenever Manchester United won the Europa League in 2018, everybody was talking about Claver coming to Man United after Jose Mourinho, infamously, after the match, went over and told him, I'm going to sign you this summer. But obviously, Patrick Kluivert and Francesco Totti had a say in that transfer, and he ended up going to Roma. It didn't work out. A lot of loans later. He's now finally getting a taste of Premier League football, and I think at this stage of his career, where he hasn't fully flourished as a footballer just yet, I think a move to a club like Bournemouth is fantastic for him. I think we could see a very, very similar impact in years to come as we've seen with Wilfred Zaha at Crystal Palace, who I think needed to go to that calibre of club and be the main man, because he's not going to be the main man if he went to one of the big clubs just yet. But if he's one of the main men or the main man at these smaller clubs in the Premier League, we could really, really see him flourish. As, look, the potential's there. He has the pace, he has the ability. It is just going to be whether he puts in the work, and if the players around him and if his manager puts in the work for him.
Yeah, agreed. This is a player that's probably going to need an arm around him, and reassured that he is going to be the top guy at Bournemouth. And I definitely think in that front 3, when you have Tavernier, Solanke, and now Kluivert, it just gives. With Billing in behind them as well, I think this just gives Bournemouth another attacking avenue, a really bright spark, a guy who's excellent with the ball at his feet, has a fantastic take-on rate. It's just the end product he needs to work on, and I've no doubt that when he's in the Premier League, and when you maybe only get that one or two chances a game, the end product does start to come, and it does start to your game develops as you see more minutes in the Premier League. So I have no doubt in my mind that the Kluivert isn't going to kick on here at Bournemouth.
Yeah, it's just going to be that thing, you were saying, it seems to be like he's a confidence player. He's a bit inconsistent, but he definitely has all the talent. He's technically very good. He's quick. As you said, his finishing would need to improve. He plays off the wing. he can play centrally, but Solanke's obviously going to play that role, so he's going to play off the wing. He's just going to have to, offer more of a goal threat and as a finisher. But a man, he's played in like 5 countries, which is crazy for a man at this age. He's played over 200 times. Obviously, he was at Roma, didn't really go well for him. But as Owen was saying there, 9 million or 10 million pounds. It is like people will be like it's a gamble for Bournemouth, but for that price tag in this day and age, it's not a gamble. It's worth a risk because if he thrives under the new manager and he gets that confidence, he will be a very, very good player in the Premier League.
Yeah, agreed. Well, moving it on then, lads, to an Irish centre-back, fan favourite of ours. Loved watching him this season for Wolves. But on the move, Nathan Collins. He has gone to Brentford to join Thomas Frank's side. And look, I'm only going to say one thing on Collins, lads. Immediately makes that Brentford defence that was already incredibly strong even stronger.
Yeah, he's a very, very good centre-back. We've seen it at Burnley before he even went to Wolves. Like, he can do it. He is that good, and he's a stalwart in the Irish national team as well. Big fee, 23 million. So Wolves have got 3 million in profit. So it's a good deal for them as well, who look to be making a few changes in the defence line under Lopetegui. I also seen that they had a 35 million pound bid in for Max Kilman from Inter Milan, which they rejected. They're looking in upwards of 45 million, which is mad money. He is a good centre back, but that's a lot of money. So there looks to be a few changes coming under Lopetegui. Could we see more Spanish players? He might be looking like Emery to dip into players that he's used to and used to playing his style of football. So I think to keep an eye on Wolves' transfer business in the next few weeks as well. But in terms of Nathan Collins, as you say, he's a very, very good, sturdy centre back with a lot of potential at only 23. So he's a player we're going to see in the Premier League for years to come. And as you say, a great move working under a regimented manager in a regimented style that I think will suit Nathan Collins' type of football.
Yeah, look, this is a guy that we have watched very intently last season and very comfortable on the ball, very good out of possession, positioning rarely wrong. The only the only doubt I have with Collins is just he can be a bit rash in the challenge sometimes. He did pick up a couple of red cards last season. The one against Man City particularly sticks out in my head. It was an awful tackle, to tell you the truth. But yeah, look, like we've said, lads, just a very competent centre back and is going to go in there to a manager that is a primarily defensive styled manager and will thrive in that system.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen Thomas Frank talking about him, and he was just full of praise. He just says he's a good, composed, calm defender, really good on the ball, good in the air in both boxes, can score goals. Just a really good defender. We were talking him up big time last year. Then he got dropped by Wolves for some reason. I'm not too sure about that, why that happened, but and it's crazy that he only signed for Wolves last summer. But now 23 million. It's definitely a good business by Brentford. Wolves obviously in financial fair play trouble, so they're going to have to sell their backs or their players, to sort that out. But even as Warren was saying there, like Kilman was another great defender for Wolves last year, and he got, I think, 35 million rejected by Napoli or Inter Milan or someone like that. But Collins, who we've seen for the Republic as well, is a really, really good centre back, and he definitely upgrades that Brentford backline, which, as you were saying, Connor, was already one of the better, backlines in the league. So good business by both. Wolves get the profit, Brentford get a really good centre back.
Yeah, definitely. And then, lads, just moving to Chelsea, just looking at their outgoings this week specifically. Koulibaly, who was only signed last season, making the move to Saudi Arabia, as is goalkeeper Edouard Mendy. But I think the most surprising one of the lads is Ruben Loftus-Cheek is going to be Tonali's replacement at AC Milan. Look, this is a guy who I feel like he's always been an almost player. I feel like he's always been on the cusp of being a very decent Premier League player, but I just think there's something that always held him back, or he was always lacking something. But look, I think, honestly, lads, is Serie A going to be the right move for a player like Loftus-Cheek?
I think so. I really do actually rate Loftus-Cheek very highly. I think he's a really, really good player, and I fully agree. He is. I think injuries have really held him back and has made him this almost player. Because I think he's got the ability to go to the very, very top, and I think this move, especially the AC Milan, where, as you say, he's probably going to replace Tonali. He's going to play that role. That's huge boots to fill. Huge boots to fill. Like, Tonali has signed for Newcastle and has become the most expensive Italian ever. Ruben
Yeah.
Loftus-Cheek is going to go to AC Milan. I think it's going to be a very, very, very similar move to Fikayo Tomori. And I think we're going to see Ruben Loftus-Cheek excel his game. If he can stay injury free, we could be seeing, honestly, one of the best midfielders in Europe. If on his day he can do it, and if he can remain fit all season and be the main man in that midfield, I think he genuinely has the ability to showcase his skills and next season be linked with a £50 million move back to Chelsea.
It is. It's definitely an interesting one. Like when I call Loftus-Cheek an almost player, by all means, I'm not trying to say that he's not a decent footballer. I, I just always thought there was, like you said, I just always thought like injuries really, really made the lad struggle. And I think at this point in his career, he realistically wasn't going to get regular minutes at Chelsea, no matter what kind of situation they're in. So I think for himself, it's a great move. Get away out of the country, not have the media's eyes on him, and he can go and do what Tomori did, as you've said, Oren, almost fade into obscurity, go out there and become a top class player. So it's definitely he's going to be one to really keep your eye on next season.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't realize he's 27 because it feels like he's a young player, but he's been about forever. He's only played like 150 games, as you said. Injuries have been a huge problem for him, but there's definitely talent there. And Tomori's an example, and even like obviously way back Salah, De Bruyne, like getting out of Chelsea isn't always a bad thing. And the way the club's been run the last few years, it's probably the best thing could ever happen to him. And he can get away there and get a bit of peace. Look at Abraham at Roma, left Chelsea, and has been successful. So I think it's a really good move, and it could end up. I think what was it, 15 million? It could end up being a steal.
Yeah, yeah, it
So
is.
with them other players as well leaving Chelsea, I think it's best. Like Koulibaly, you were talking about there, like they bought him. What was it, last summer or the summer
Yeah,
before?
last
Like,
summer.
and they've lost a load of money on him. And Napoli was top player, but like at Chelsea, he's just been a disaster. Just really, really poor centre back. He was linked to City for so long. Maybe it is. I think with Chelsea, we're seeing this with Mount, we're seeing it with Havertz, we're seeing it with Koulibaly, we're seeing it with Loftus-Cheek. Maybe it's just best to get out of Chelsea because it just seems to be that situation. Over the last 18 months has just been a disaster. Changing managers, the ownership's been poor. They're making poor signings. Just maybe best. Even Mendy, the goalkeeper, he was playing well under Tuchel, and now he's getting out as well. Like maybe it's just better just to get out of there, and a lot of them have lost confidence, so they get that confidence back at their new clubs.
Yeah, definitely. And then, yeah, just sticking with Chelsea's outgoings then. Mason Mount confirmed, Manchester United player. Medicals completed, just waiting for the club's official announcement, but it's a done deal. Obviously, Connor, me and you touched on Mount a wee bit last week with Stefan from United Philosophy. So if you haven't already, guys, please go and check out Perfect Preseason Manchester United edition. Look, I've really taken a step back this week, and I've really sort of looked at Mount in detail and really tried to, almost have a go at myself. And yeah, I think, Connor, maybe throughout the season, me and you have been maybe a little too harsh on Mason Mount. I think recency bias is a massive thing. And when somebody has a bad season, we're quick to jump on them and quick to call them shite.
No,
When
I agree with
actually,
that.
do you
That's
know
what I said
what?
about the Chelsea situation as well. Needs to be factored in. You know what I mean? Like how bad
Yes.
they've been over the 18 and how they're run. Because before that, under Tuchel, he was playing unbelievably.
Yeah. And this is a player, when I've done my deep dive in on him, because I will have an article coming out this week on him. Pressing numbers, excellent. A great creator. Versatility is another thing that he offers. Can play a multitude of positions. And I think for the fee, £55 million, I don't think there were, for Manchester United, I don't think there were many better alternatives in the market at that kind of price range.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I've not rated Mount very highly, but as you say, recency bias is a huge, huge thing. Like even if you're talking about the start of last season, you both know that whenever PSG apparently offered that 90 million or 70 million for Rashford or whatever, I said snap their hand off. But obviously Rashford has proved me wrong fully, and I'm really, really hoping that Mason Mount proves me wrong. I do think the fee is a lot. I do think he's a quality player, but with 1 year in your contract, you shouldn't be going for a fee of £60 million. But I get his age and stuff, and being English, it all does factor in, and even just in the market, like you're not going to get a player like that for much less anyway. But I'm hoping he proves me wrong. I did see something today that since his debut in the Premier League with Chelsea, he has the most goals, most assists, most starts, most appearances, most chances created. So it looks like, on paper at least, that we're buying Chelsea's best player. And if we're buying a team like Chelsea's best player for £60 million, that could end up being a bargain. The only thing I can really say about Mount personally is I back my manager fully. And Eric Ten Hag seems to know what he's doing if this season's anything to go by. And he was his priority target in midfield. Apparently, he went into negotiations and said, no, I want Mason Mount. Like, he is the perfect player for my system. He knows better than us. So, yeah, I fully trust him. And I'm hoping and praying Mason Mount turns out to be good, because if he's shite, oh, man.
But that's the thing as well. I did said he is an upgrade over Ericsson as well at the minute, obviously, because Ericsson really fell off towards the end of the season. But hopefully we're getting the player that we got a few years ago. I agree with the fee. You know, you're getting a player who had a year left on his contract and wanted to go to Man United and said to Chelsea, I'm not signing a new contract, and we still paid 60 million for him. That's a bit, even like by United standards of negotiating, that is pretty pathetic. But it could be I'm going to give him a chance. I'm going to give him a chance. As you said, Connor, we're going to give him a chance. He's a United player now. We're going to trust Ten Hag. And hopefully, I hope to be wrong every week. I hope to be saying, oh, I got this player wrong. He's a top player. But we'll just have to wait and see. But United's
Well, look,
negotiating, as we talked about last week, Connor, it is pathetic. Like,
yeah. Look,
60 million for a lad who's out of contract next year.
I do agree. The only thing is, I think when it comes to, say, the likes of Mount, because he was like Mr. Chelsea or whatever you want to call it, I think he was even if it is only the final year of his contract, he was always going to cost money. Plus, he's English, so again, add that tax onto it as well. Plus, you're selling to a rival, add that tax on again as well. Like, realistically, I do think United could have got Mount for somewhere in the region of like 40 million, if they really had tried hard enough. But look, it's obviously a player that Ten Hag really, really wanted and needed to get in. So I think when it comes to what your manager needs and backing your manager, I think you just have to go all out and get that kind of player. But again, lads, moving on then to Liverpool. Dominic Szoboszlai, the Hungarian, has signed for Liverpool. He joins Alexis McAllister through the door. They're also being linked to Romeo Lavia as well, very, very heavily too. So look, you can see Liverpool immediately making moves in this transfer market to shore up that midfield. And to be honest, when I seen that they got Szoboszlai done, I was really, really, really impressed. And obviously, I don't like to say that because I fucking hate them, but it's a cracking bit of business for a cracking player.
Yeah, he is. He's really good. He's really, really good. On the sign him, I think his release clause expired on midnight of the 1st, and they signed him before that, obviously. Very, very quick deal. That's another thing about Manchester United in terms of negotiations. Everything drags out over weeks and fucking months, but Liverpool can get a deal done in a day. Do you know what I mean? It's difficult, but yeah, in terms of Szoboszlai, fantastic player, Hungarian captain, so he's a leader even despite his young age. He has had a few experiences as well. He was very, very good in the Austrian league before making the move to Germany, and we've seen multiple players make the exact same or similar career path before coming to the Premier League. So he could turn out to be really, really successful for Liverpool. My only worry at the minute is they need to sign a player like Lavia. They need a defensive player. They can't go in thinking McAllister, Fabinho, if he was playing like last season, and Szoboszlai is going to be their perfect midfield, because it's not. They need to keep investing in that midfield. And Trent isn't going to be a midfielder next year either. I can't see it, to be honest. I think that was just a short-term fix, as I said last season. But in terms of the player himself, quality player. He can play like Mount. He can play in midfield, or he can play anywhere across the front three as well. So in terms of versatility, it's going to be really, really good for Jurgen Klopp's team. I don't think necessarily he's going to start every game. So I do think him and McAllister play quite a similar role. It'll be interesting to see how Liverpool factor their way around these players because they are quite attacking minded. Um, but in terms of the actual player himself, a quality player, and he deserves a move like Liverpool. To be honest, he wanted out of RB Leipzig. He made that very very known. Um, he was linked with Newcastle for a long long while, and they ended up pulling out because they didn't want to pay the transfer fee. So that kind of sticks in my head as well because Newcastle seem to know what they're doing in the transfer market since they've had their new owners. So I wonder why they've pulled out negotiations if it was just a case of the fee being too much. But on paper, a good signing for Liverpool.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't really have any hesitation over the transfer fee, to be honest, because Klopp and the Liverpool recruitment do tend to get it right more than they get it wrong. So I don't really query the fee as such. I definitely don't query the player. I really, really do think he's excellent. I understand what you're saying, Owen. Yes, they do play quite similar positions, but the only thing I'll say is Szoboszlai, out of, like, between the two of them, is definitely the more like out and out attacking midfielder. Like, when we spoke about McAllister 2 episodes ago, we did say if Liverpool fans were expecting goals and assists from McAllister, it's not really his game. He is more of a recovery and progressor of the ball. I think Szoboszlai is the complete opposite to that. Well, not the complete opposite, but I think he's late runs into the box, makes himself available in space, crosses the ball, shoots, an excellent distributor of the ball, a dribbler as well, which I didn't really think that Liverpool had added to in this midfield, but I do completely agree with you, Oren. I think, right, you've got your two sort of attack-minded midfielders. Now you need to go out, you need to get a destroyer in there to sit and protect that, if we're being quite honest, fragile back four.
Yeah, again, I agree with you lads. Like, Liverpool are sorting out their weakness, which was midfield. They've bought two good players. Again, as you said, like a really creative player. Seen he has like 73 assists in 200 games. Last year, got 10 assists. Scored in the cup final. One of RB's best players, even in the Champions League, impressed. And a hungry captain, was part of the team that beat England last summer 4-0 and was one of their best players. Can take a free kick, long range goals. Really good crosser. I've seen he's one of the best crossers in the Bundesliga. Can play off, the left and midfield. He can play as a number 8. I've seen he got the number 8 jersey, so I think he will play as a number 8. Really good signing. And as you said, like, Newcastle were after him. I know Newcastle are trying to be a bit more safe because of financial fair play again with their signings. But again, I think this is going to be a great signing for Liverpool. And with Klopp's recruitment and the way Klopp improves players, Liverpool are going to challenge again for the league next year, I believe. And I think I do agree with you boys both as well. They need a new defensive midfielder because Fabinho was past it last year. He was a huge weakness. If they could go get a player like Lavia, and maybe another midfielder, they're going to be a serious, team next year. And even the signings last year, like Nunez, Salah plays to his best. Gakpo will have a full preseason. They're gonna be hard to beat. And as you said, Connor, I don't want that to happen, but I have to be fair and I have to say they're going to be a scary opposition for anyone next year.
Yeah, definitely. So watch this space. We'll just see whether they can get Lavia over the line. And finally, lads, just before we wrap this up, moving to Ange Postecoglou's Tottenham Hotspur, 2 signings in through the door, soon to be 3 as well. Manor Solomon, James Maddison, and Vicario, the Italian goalkeeper. So pulled out of the deal for Raya. Rightly, in my opinion. I don't think, and look, we debated this how many times, lads, last year on the podcast. I don't think Raya's worth 40 million. So I'm sort of, from a Spurs perspective and from Oshin's perspective, I'm sort of glad they backed out of that deal. They've got Vicario, young goalkeeper, 25 years of age, has played for Italy's national team, boasted one of the best save percentage rates in Europe last season. James Maddison, look, do we really need to say all that much in James Maddison? We know what he's going to offer to Spurs. He's a quality player. And Manor Solomon. Solomon, maybe the bit of the interesting choice there. Obviously had an excellent last 6 months of the season, or well, post-World Cup. It was absolutely excellent. So, what do we think of these 3 transfers then, lads?
Improves Spurs, and that's what they needed to do this transfer window. Especially goalkeeper. Personally, I felt goalkeeper was their main target to upgrade, let's say, for this season. I'm not going to sit here and say I've watched Vicario play loads and loads, because I haven't. But talking about stats and on paper, he's an upgrade on Hugo Lloris over the last few years anyway. At 25, he has so much room for potential and so much room to improve. And for such a small transfer fee as well, I think it's brilliant business from Ange Postecoglou, and I think that is what he's going to bring to Spurs as well. Like, we've seen him complete the deal for Kulusevski, complete the deal for Pedro Porro. He's got Monar Solomon, who, as you said, in the last 6 months at Fulham was fantastic. He's got him on a free transfer. Like, that's brilliant business. Monar Solomon's not going to start every game for Tottenham Hotspur by any means, but he'll come in when needed. He'll do a job. He's very much, in my opinion, a replacement for Lucas Moura, who left on a free transfer, who had a similar role, didn't start every game, but when asked upon for the majority of the time, he'll deliver. And yeah, James Maddison, £40 million, I think is ridiculously low for him. I think that's another reason why I think we've overpaid for Mason Mount, because if you're looking at types of players, I would much rather James Maddison. I think he's absolutely fantastic. But yes, he can't play the same positions as Mount, so I understand the difference in player. But James Maddison to Tottenham Hotspur, I think, is fantastic. From a player's perspective, I don't really understand it in terms of like a sporting move. I get it; it's an upgrade on Leicester, and obviously it's an upgrade in the Championship. But I think unless Harry Kane stays, I think it could be difficult for James Maddison, because I think with potentially just Richarlison or Son or whoever's going to play a central striker up front, it mightn't be as easy for Maddison as maybe previously, where he's been the main man. However, I think he can fully make himself the main man at Tottenham Hotspur, and I think that is part of the reason he's moved. He wants to play under Ange Postecoglou, who we know plays a good style of football. And these players are moving to Spurs, looking to get them back to where they rightfully belong, playing and competing for top four. So yeah, exciting times ahead at Spurs. I said it whenever Ange was first linked with the Tottenham post. I thought he was going to be really, really good, and I said it to John Joe the other day. I think on paper, anyway, Ange Postecoglou ranks very, very highly among the current Premier League managers. So Spurs could have a really, really good season this season.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting one. I know from Ashin's perspective, he's very, very excited. The signings and the deals that they've managed to get done. And again, I do agree with you, Owen. It is kind of that Celtic strategy, but on a Premier League level now, where it's like savvy business. It's not necessarily overpaying or paying massive money for quality players. It's getting the business done and getting savvy business done. So it's good to see that sort of Celtic model can actually be transferred over to the Premier League. Now, I mean, obviously we're yet to see whether it's successful or not, but I mean, judging by it on paper, you're looking at it going, that's some interesting business. As for the goalkeeper Vicario, look, again, I'm like you, Warren, I haven't watched a whole pile of them, but what I did see of him in some of the scouting packages that I was doing on him, very similar to Raya. Really good distributor of the ball, very comfortable with the ball at his feet, will give Spurs that ability to play out from the back, and ultimately is a very decent shot stopper as well. And I think that was really, really important for Spurs. I think Lloris, obviously, I mean, it's no secret, he's not the same player he was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So they did need to upgrade in that department. But the only thing I'll disagree with you on, Oren, is I actually don't think goalkeeper was their most important priority, though, this summer. To me, it is still centre backs. And I think Spurs still need to go and get that defence sorted. They are being linked with the Wolfsburg centre-back, Van de Veen, I think his name is. He's sort of a very talented young centre-back. So it's just interesting to see what they do that end of the market. Apparently they're going to bring back Longley. I think that's an absolutely terrible move, to be completely honest. He is crap. And there's no other word I can use to describe him other than crap. So I really hope they don't go back in for him, because I don't think he'll offer them anything that we hadn't already seen in the previous 12 months. But yes, agreed. Very interesting time at Spurs, and it'll be interesting to see where the rest of the market goes. And it does, I agree, Oren, it does hinge around whether Harry Kane stays or not.
Yeah, that's it. Like, it is going to be up to Harry Kane, because we've seen how much he carried that Tottenham side last year, and they still finished, was it 8th?
8th, yeah.
So I do think the goalkeeper, I wouldn't have went Raya, just because 40 million for a player that's out of contract next year. I thought they might have tried to hold it out for longer to see because if like Brentford signed a goalkeeper, so they're probably going to sell Raya eventually for a cheaper price. But you know, I seen Ange spoke to him and he spoke good English and he's seen him as a good goalkeeper. I haven't seen him ever play, to be honest. But I've just seen him. He's got called up for Italy. Good shot stopper. I've seen Newcastle and Forest were both after him in the January transfer window, and top Italian sides were after him. So he is a very, you know, sought after keeper who's only 25, which is very, very young for a keeper. Obviously the Maddison deal is a great deal. A player that was out of contract next year, and obviously Leicester got relegated, but still to get him, especially over Newcastle, who I thought he would have went to. I think we were saying it all in the transfer specials in the previous months. We were all saying he's going to go to Newcastle, he's going to go to Newcastle, but he's chosen Spurs. And again, he spoke to Ange, and he just said he give himself belief, and he'll probably star in this Tottenham side. Maybe he wouldn't have starred in the Newcastle side, but they're getting a player that's scored like 10 goals, 9 assists last year. You know, it's been consistently a top player for the last 5 or 6 years in the Premier League. And as you said about Solomon, a player that kind of came off, then didn't actually, like for Fulham, he came off the bench a lot. So that role, doing that for Spurs, getting goals at big times. And I would agree with you, Connor, that centre back is massive. Longley, as you know, I don't rate at all. I think he's awful. Dyer is not good enough to play for a top side. Romero he is a good centre back, but very aggressive. Can get red carded very easily. So for Spurs, I know you boys are obviously excited about Spurs. I am not as excited. I think Ange is a good manager, but I can see Spurs. You know, I think Villa, if they do not keep Keane, I think Villa are better. Like will do better than Spurs next year, 100%. And I think Spurs, like, what's their goal? Top six, sixth place. That's all I can see from
No,
them, to be honest. Because I think
no, I'd say their goal, lad, 100% is to be back playing Champions League football next year.
I just like, and I'm
100%.
not being like, I'm not being negative, but I do not see that happening. These signings, yes, okay, Maddison's a good player. You know, they're going for a goalkeeper that's played in Italy. We don't know enough about him yet. They need centre backs. You know, their midfield last year was not great either. You know, Bentancur obviously got injured and stuff like that, but Basuma was terrible. Like he just came in and was really, really poor. I, I don't see the Spurs side getting Champions League football or anywhere near it, to be honest. And I know Ange is good, but unless Ange pulls off a miracle, that's all I can see happening is seventh, eighth place finish again. I could be proven wrong because Spurs last year, everybody was talking them up, saying they're going to get top four, 100%, and they completely collapsed. So I could be proven wrong, but I think these signings are good signings, but they're not Champions League football signings for me.
Well, I think when you look at Spurs, it will depend on the rest of the business that they do in the summer. But I am definitely looking at this summer as a rebuild phase for
Yeah.
Spurs. When you look at some of the names that they're happy enough to let go, they're happy enough to let Højbjerg go. They're happy enough to let Dyer go. Lloris is already gone. You know, I think this phase for Spurs is definitely like a rebuild phase, and it's really Postecoglou looking to stamp his mark on the team. Apparently they're willing to let Basuma go as well. So I do think it just depends. I think it is a rebuild phase for Spurs, but I think the players that they've signed thus far, like Solomon, Maddison, about to get this young fella Van de Veen, who is a really, really good centre back, to be honest. A lot of people at Wolfsburg would talk up, is it Lacroix or Lacroix?
Yeah.
The French centre back, you
Pronounce
know who I'm talking about anyway. The pacey one from FIFA. I think
exactly.
a, a lot of people would talk
Longley
him
was
up.
good on FIFA too. Longley was good in FIFA too. Like
He was to be fair, but I think a lot of
he
people
turned out
talk up this
terrible.
fella. A lot of people talk up this fella Lacroix, but I think this guy Van de Veen is meant to be the much more solid of the two. They're also linked with, is it Sobhy, the centre back from Bayer Leverkusen? That they're also actively pursuing him as well. So look, I can see this as being a big rebuild season for Spurs, and I do sort of trust Postecoglou to get it right, really. Owen, I know, like you obviously you've watched Celtic a lot more than me and Connor have, to be honest. So like you would be able to give us a better insight into Postecoglou. Like, did you feel like this was maybe a season too early for him to make that step up to Spurs?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think Ange Postecoglou genuinely is top five in the Premier League already. I just think he's that good a manager. Obviously, he has to prove it, but on paper, in terms of managerial experience, I think he's top five. Like, even I think people overlook the job he even done with Australia, getting them to the finals of the World Cup. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
He won the Asian Cup as well.
what like that's Australia's targets is qualifying for these competitions, let alone getting to the latter stages of these competitions. So, like, I know people can talk about his man management and stuff, but and I know it's easy to like denote Celtic's accomplishments, but like that club was in dire need of change whenever Neil Lennon took over again, and he completely changed not just results, but the whole atmosphere of the club changed. Whenever Ange Postecoglou came in, because it was really in a bad way after Brendan Rodgers left so abruptly. So yeah, I don't think it was a season too early. I think it was the right time to come in for Spurs. I do understand people saying he should have came to a smaller club, but no, he needs to go straight into the firing line. And I think a club like Spurs, who, as you say, are in a rebuild phase, I think it's a perfect opportunity for him to showcase what he can do. Um, Look, he plays a progressive style of football. He likes his wing backs getting into the game and all as well. So I think in terms of the bigger clubs rather in the Premier League, Spurs was probably his most suited asset, especially with the players they've already got. But I think, despite him being such a good manager in my eyes, I think a lot will depend just on Harry Kane's transfer. If Harry Kane goes, Spurs are going to be in real trouble, real trouble. Like, I understand everybody thinks Erling Haaland's the best footballer in the world. I fully get it. I think he's unbelievable. However, do I think Erling Haaland scores 30 league goals for Tottenham Hotspur last season? No. Do I think Harry Kane scores 52 goals in all competitions for Manchester City in that team last year? Yes, 100%. Um, so I think if Harry Kane goes, it's going to be really, really difficult for Spurs no matter what. I would love to see them, if he does go, sign a player like Tommy Abraham or something to replace him. Not that he is of the same caliber of Harry Kane, but he does have similar qualities. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of Ange Postecoglou's, especially because we know football is a results business, the first couple of weeks are going to be really, really difficult for Ange Postecoglou, especially if Kane goes. Um, the worst thing that could happen for Tottenham Hotspur is Kane stays and then starts the season with Spurs and then leaves at the end of the transfer window. That would be horrifying for Spurs. Um, but yeah, as much as I rate him as a manager, I think it will come down to the players that he's got and the players he signs. And I think for the business he's done so far, he's doing well.
Yeah. Look, it's going to be an interesting one for Spurs, definitely, and it's one that we'll be covering avidly here on the podcast. So that's going to do it for this week's episode, folks. That was our third installment of our summer transfer specials. If you haven't already, please go and check out our first two to keep up to date with those early deals and those early goings on in the Premier League. Also, last week's episode, already plugged it, but plug it again. Perfect preseason Manchester United edition with a special guest on, Stefan McVeigh from the United Philosophy. So if you are a Manchester United fan, head on over, check it out, and you can see our views on what United really need to do this summer in order to take that next step. As always, at Bottom Bins Pod, Twitter, Instagram and TikTok. Going to have a lot of content coming on up there over in the next few weeks, and we've added some new content over them over the last few weeks as well. You can find us on the Parlay Sports app, PRLY Sports, on the Apple App Store to jump in and join the footballing conversation. And as always, keep it bottom bins.
Keep it bottom bins.
Bottom ends.